name since Odia became the sixth classical language. This festival aims to celebrate the creative spirit of Bhubaneswar as a creative city as well as a temple city and honors the rich literary diversity it offers. So, without much delay, let's begin our first session of day 3 of KLF. So it's about the book launch of one of the very great book of mothers and perishables and other perishables written by Radhika Oberoi. So please have a big round of applause for Radhika Oberoi. Now I'd like to invite Radhika Oberoi ma'am along with the moderator Nidhi Garg to please come to the dais. Please have a huge round of applause for both of them. Over to you, ma'am.
So let's dwell right into the topic, into the book of mothers and other perishables. What inspired you, Radhika, to write this book, and how did you name this book?
Yeah, since you've delved right into the title of the book, Of Mothers and Other Perishables is really a tribute to Gabriel Garcia Marquez, is his famous novel called Of Love and Other Demons. And it really is a tribute to mothers. It's a tribute to women who die young, perhaps. And there's a deeply personal reason why I wrote this book. It's a tribute to my mother. I wanted to commemorate my mother's life. She passed away when I was 15 years old. She died of cancer. And I wanted to commemorate her life in some way, but I did not want to write a morbid book. So I wanted to write a book that was morbidly funny, that was whimsical, that was nostalgic, and perhaps melancholic. So I've created a dead narrator. The novel is partly told by a dead female narrator and partly told by her daughter, named The Wailer. She's nicknamed The Wailer after the band Bob Marley and the Wailers. And so these are two entirely different worlds that collide in this novel. So the dead mother's life is told, through her voice. She inhabits a very claustrophobic space called the storeroom. She sort of inhabits the storeroom, which contains all her earthly belongings. It contains vinyl records, an old sewing machine, a torn leather suitcase. And it is through this space that she tells her story about her life as a young woman growing up in Delhi in the 1970s and 80s. And in alternating chapters, you get to know about her daughter, the Wailer, who lives in Delhi and works in advertising. And it's also a sketch of a very contemporary city, the city of Delhi, where, which is always very volatile. The city's politics is extremely volatile. And so the novel is also an extremely contemporary novel and not just a nostalgic one.
You have chosen the storeroom as the central motive.
Yes.
What made you choose that? It's a different thing than usual novels,
Yeah. So the storeroom is, it really is the central metaphor, the central conceit of this novel. It's a very claustrophobic space. It's a tiny space, but it expands as well depending on your imagination and depending on the person who inhabits that space. So when the Wailer, who's the dead woman's daughter, when she visits the storeroom, she she creates a world for herself. So she slips back into her childhood. She lets her imagination play out fully in the storeroom, which really contains also, artifacts from her childhood. So it contains old letters, old photographs, her mother's saris, which are wrapped in malmal. And she goes into the storeroom and she wraps and unwraps the saris and sits there, cries, sometimes recites a poem or two for her mother. So she turns that space into a really expansive space of the mind. Her younger sister, Toon, has an entirely different relationship with the storeroom. Toon finds the space claustrophobic and outdated. So for Toon, the space represents an era that she does not wish to associate with. It represents the ghosts of the past. And Toon is someone who lives in the present moment. She's deeply immersed in her life. She's deeply immersed in enjoying her life. So she finds that space stifling, claustrophobic, and completely out of sync with her own life. So the storeroom really represents memory. It represents how memory plays out in our lives, and also that the book in so many ways is a tribute to memory and the jaggedness and inconsistency of memory. So whenever we recall something or we try to recollect a certain moment in time, we will always recollect it in parts. We'll recollect it partially and not fully or not wholly. So memory can be extremely disjointed, memory can be extremely inconsistent, memory can be unreliable. And this book then is a tribute to how we remember as well.
Right, right. And both the daughters, the have such a distinct personality. How did you, um,
Yeah.
develop that characteristic between two daughters having so distinct personalities and their relationship with their mother?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there are two daughters in this novel, and maybe I'll read a bit as well at a later
Yeah,
stage. Yeah,
the Whaler and Toon.
the Whaler and Toon. So the Whaler is the elder daughter, and Toon is the younger daughter, and she's nicknamed Toon because when she was a child, she would love watching cartoons, so Tom and Jerry, and these were her favorite cartoons, and so her mother used to call her Toon. You know how mothers are, they nickname their children, so she nicknamed the Whaler and Toon, and so you don't really get to know their real names in the novel at all. They both of them have entirely different personalities, and both of them have entirely different relationships with each other as well as with the storeroom. Now the thing is that Toon does not have her own chapters. You get to know Toon only through the mother's memories and through the Whaler's relationship with her. So Toon is this really, she's a millennial and she's extremely ambitious and very worldly. And she's, starting up this coffee venture with her boss. She's also romantically inclined towards him, and they represent the new world, the new economy, a very material world. The Vela, who's older, represents a more nostalgic era, represents a more nostalgic she's a more nostalgic person. And so the two of them don't speak. So there's this large, vast, turgid silence between Toon and the Whaler. And that silence is filled by perhaps the storeroom and the things that lie in the storeroom. So when the Whaler enters the storeroom, she pays tribute to her mother. She commemorates her mother's life. Toon does not enter the storeroom at all. But towards the end of the novel, we do see Toon entering the storeroom once and breaking down and also wishing for her mother in her own way.
So this novel also touches the Delhi's socio-political history.
Yeah.
So how does this personal and political history intertwine in your novel?
Yeah. So there is, it's a very political novel, and that's a good question again. It's a very political novel because it also deals with the Citizenship Amendment Act, the anti-CAA protests that took place in Delhi in 2020 when, Muslims came out to protest the CAA bill. In a small stretch of road called Shaheen Bagh, a lot of Muslim women came out and protested. That part of Delhi that is delineated through the Whaler and the Whaler's experiences in the city and in the real world. So the Whaler works in advertising, and one of the characters in the novel, he's called Nawab Zada. He's an art director who works in an advertising firm, and he gets involved in the protests. And the Whaler is also perhaps involved in her own way. She arrives at the site of protest, and she's startled by what she sees, because that really is her first encounter with what goes on the streets of Delhi. And so she's involuntarily, inadvertently involved in the protests. Nawab Zada is involved fully, which leads to very tragic consequences for him. But the Whaler is inadvertently involved. And so the novel really deals with, the socio-economic and the political, aspects of Delhi during 2020. So it's both, it's a very contradictory universe that you get to see in the novel. It's also the past, it's how the past collides with the present.
Your novel also weaves nazms and nostalgia.
Yeah.
So was there any literary influence into your writing?
Yeah, there are several literary influences. And, nostalgia is called memory's stepchild. There's a critic called Dennis Walder who calls it memory's stepchild. So I really wanted to play around with, again, memory and nostalgia. Salman Rushdie, he's a great influence upon my work. And if you've read Midnight's Children, it's a very digressional, patchy account of the city of Bombay. He revisits the city of Bombay through his mind. It's his memory that recreates Bombay for him, and he calls it Bombays of the mind. There's Marquez, of course, who goes back to Macando in so many different ways in his novels. And there's another novel called Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, which is not really about memory, but it is about death and grief and bereavement. So it is about the death of William Shakespeare's son, Hamnet Shakespeare, and it is about the mother's grief and about how the mother articulates her grief for her dead son. And again, that's told in alternating chapters. It takes you back into the mother's life and also the present moment. And it's interesting how men and women also grieve differently, because in Hamnet, William Shakespeare, I mean, a fictional William Shakespeare, goes back after the death of his child. He died of the plague. He goes back to London and immerses himself in his work. He becomes a famous playwright, while his wife is left at home alone to grieve, to really grieve over the son. And she can't overcome her grief because her universe, is her children and her home. And in my novel, the mother's already dead. So it is the family that's grieving. And it's about how grief alters family dynamics and how grief can change familial relationships.
So some reviews also say that you have put in humor into grief.
Yes.
So was it done intentionally to lighten up the emotional weight while your reader reads and goes through it?
Yes, it was. I don't know if I did it intentionally. I was just trying to create a voice that is humorous. I didn't want the mother to sound melancholic or morbid. And this is what she says right at the beginning, that I will try to sound like a real person. So she's not a ghost. She's simply a disembodied voice. And she's a voice that's occasionally funny. So she notices things in the house. She notices that her photographs have been uploaded on Instagram. She uses the word uploaded for the first time. She plays around with the word on her tongue and enjoys the sound of the word. So she enjoys the new world and she enjoys its new technology. She marvels at the refrigerator in the kitchen, which is entirely new and very different from her boxy refrigerator. She wants to participate, of course, in the family, but can't participate. So can I read a little bit from perhaps the first?
Why not? Why not?
Maybe give you a flavor.
Sure.
Never mind. I'll just read right from the beginning because it gives you a flavor of the book. This is my favorite part of the house, the storeroom. It's tiny, really. There was barely enough room for me to stand inside it when I was alive. Everything is exactly the way it was all those years ago when the storeroom was built to accommodate all the worldly requirements of my life. Here are the Godrej Almeras, all four of them, standing in pairs and facing each other. This one to my left has some of my saris, the Banarsis. They no longer hang from satin hangers. They have been folded and wrapped in malmal as though they were corpses of hand-woven silk and gold. Everything inside the storeroom is a corpse of some sort. Here is the corpse of a winter evening. There is the corpse of a trip to Europe. Everything, everywhere there are corpses of charmed days and perfumed nights, stilled before their time. I could wrap a Banarsi around what used to be my slender but pleasingly plump in all the right places body, my husband used to say, even now, when all that is left of me is this disembodied voice. It wouldn't be obvious to my daughter, who has been coming into the storeroom for the nearly 3 decades that I have been dead, to unfold and refold the saris in a variety of ways so that the fabric doesn't tear, that I have draped one of my favorites around me. Maybe I'll pick the cobalt blue Katan silk with the Meenakari work. I can still smell the zari on it. So, she's a very nostalgic.
Yeah, very nice. Very well. Very well written.
Thanks so much. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have very young crowd. So what would you say or have and what do you think should be the thing that a upcoming writer should have in mind if they are planning to write on personal themes?
Yeah, again, an interesting question. So, an upcoming writer could perhaps, it's always interesting to examine your life in retrospect. So, look back. And the older you get, the more memories you have. So, if you're really young, you're still experiencing life. So, what I would suggest is experience life to the fullest, live it to the fullest, do whatever brings you great joy and happiness. And of course, some tragic moments will also occur because that's just how life is, and excavate your material, excavate your own life to begin with, and see what material comes out of it. And if you're attempting fiction, then that's really the best way to fictionalize a real story, because your story is going to be unique. Anyway, your story is a story that only you can tell. No one else can tell your story as beautifully as you can, and in a voice that is as compelling as your own. So it's really important not to follow trends or not to see what's really hot or what's politically hot. I don't believe in that. I mean, don't pick a politically hot agenda just because you want to write a bestseller. Pick something, pick a subject that you're convinced about or that you're dying to write about. It could really be about your own mother or your grandmother, or about your best friend, or a lover that you had in the past, or a relationship that never worked out, heartache. These themes are as important as wars and as famine and all of it, and sometimes two or three themes collide to form a really brilliant novel. So excavate your own life, I would suggest, really.
That's, I think that's a piece of advice that everyone has a takeaway from. In this era of digital,
Yeah.
era and social media, where the span of attention is really, growing low,
Yeah.
does it influence the storytelling?
Yes, it does. And sometimes social media allows you a lot of attention. But I still feel that the fine craft of writing, slogging over a page, really sculpting your sentences can't happen if you're constantly on social media. That's just me. But a lot of people do find audiences and fame through social media, and that's great too. Attention spans have diminished. They
Because
have,
they are trying to, get the dopamine hit from those 2 seconds reel, 10 seconds reel.
yeah.
And even recently I read somewhere that people go through those YouTube videos, where they tell about the books rather than reading the whole book and everything,
Yes.
so there has been a change.
Yes.
And people, that that patience to read through a book has gone down. We
Yes.
cannot deny that.
Yes.
So what is your take on that?
So attention spans have diminished. I guess the only way to revive your attention spans is perhaps to log off. One of my favorite authors, Zadie Smith, she's written a brilliant book called On Beauty. One of her, you know, pieces of advice to young people is to log off when you're working. It's really difficult to not be connected to either your phone. We're constantly scrolling. There's so many screens now that distract us. So if you can allow yourself to stay away from all of it and to allow to not be distracted by social media, then perhaps you'll spend a lot more time over your craft and over your sentences. So for me, craft and voice and the cadence of a sentence is really important. And that doesn't come if you're spending too much time on social media, I feel.
Absolutely. And would you like to talk about any of your upcoming project or plots that you're working on?
I'm actually simply working on a few short stories that I'm convinced about. Now, short stories are also given stepmotherly treatment, and it's very hard to sell a short story collection, but I love them. It's far harder to write a good short story than it is to write a novel. So I'm working on a few short stories, and I also write literary criticism. I write essays on books. So there are some projects. I'm not really working on a new novel right now. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Can we end it with a small rapid fire?
Sure.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Fiction, non-fiction,
Fiction,
poetry, prose,
prose.
morning person, night owl.
Morning person, but this is really black and white. There should be some sometimes morning, sometimes night.
One thing you can't write without
One thing I can't write: coffee.
coffee. So you're a coffee person.
Yes,
Pen or paper or laptop?
laptop.
One book that you have reread.
On Beauty by Zadie Smith.
Okay, one character from your book or from anyone's book that you would want to have a coffee with.
Salim Sinai, Midnight's Children.
Okay. And any villain character that you really admire?
Uh, a villain? You mean a villain that I admire? Well, there are several, like Shakespeare created several villains. So there's not really a villain, but like Hamlet, his dilemmas. That, yeah, admire.
Okay, good. We are open to questions. Anyone would want to ask any question? Anyone has any question? Yeah, please.
My question is, when did you realize that you should really start writing like a novel, or you should be a writer or anything like that?
Thank you for asking me that. I think I've been writing all my life, and I started writing when I was in school. I was 8 or 9 years old, and I had an English teacher in school who really encouraged. I wrote really bad poetry to begin with in school, and I wrote these essays, really bad essays. I mean, they were good, I guess. They were, they were grammatically.
That's what I was thinking. At that age, it would have been so good, but
Yeah.
now that you've grown up, you feel, oh, that wasn't that good. But every piece of art, it's a piece of art of creative writing that is good at that age. वो
Yeah.
प्यार, वो इश्क, तब इश्क ही था.
Absolutely. So my love for books, and again, my mother also, when she was alive, she would read to me. She read *The Wind in the Willows* by Kenneth. It's a beautiful anthropomorphic novel, and it's really meant for children, but even adults can read it. And it's got these really lovely Toad of Toad Hall, really lovely characters, anthropomorphic characters. And so she read to me. She imbibed the love for reading in me. That helps you become a good writer. The more you read, the better you become at your craft. And so I love to read, actually. So I started reading a lot. I read a lot in school, I read in college, I read far beyond my syllabus in college, and so just loved reading, and this natural affiliation to readers and writers. And I started attending book launches and book events, and finally, after several years of working, I wrote my first novel. So it's and this is my second.
Anything that you would like to talk about your first novel?
Okay, my first novel is it's called Stillborn Season. It's actually a novel told in short stories. So it's very episodic, and it's got multiple narrators. Each chapter is different from the previous. It's a very different novel from this one, and a very political novel. It's about the anti-Sikh riots that took place in Delhi in 1984. And it's got multiple narrators. And it's again got this one character, this young girl called Amrit, whose grandfather witnesses the 84 riots, and then Amrit grows up to become a journalist and embarks upon her own investigation of the 1984 riots. So it's very, very different from this, and it's also a tribute to Delhi. It's a love letter to Delhi and its homes and its broad avenues, and all the places that I grew up in. That was actually a far more nostalgic book for me than this one, even though that's a far more political book, because that really is about Delhi and what happened in 84. And I really researched a lot. The scaffolding of that novel is based on a lot of research, even though I hope the research doesn't show as much. But that's a far more political novel than this one.
Thank you. Anyone? Any?
As we read so many books, we are inspired by the writings, and we also sometimes feel that we wish that we could write like that. The beautiful words inspire us so much, but how can we confident? How can we gather that confidence to write, and how can we be confident about what we write? Because it's very, it feels very conscious that is it good?
Will we be judged on that? Yeah, basically, she wants to tell that how should one deal with that self-doubt,
Yeah.
Writers, new writers.
So we are always being judged. I think self-doubt is a very ripe area, and I think it's really important to constantly doubt yourself. It's important not to be overconfident, and constantly doubt yourself, constantly be in awe of the greats. If you've read, say Emily Bronte or Charles Dickens, or if whoever you think are the greats. If you read William Shakespeare's plays, how he uses language, and constantly doubt the quality of your own work when compared with that. So, and also tell yourself you're never going to reach those levels. But doubt is what creates good writing, according to me, because the more you doubt yourself, the harder you try on the page, and the more original you attempt your writing to be. And something interesting comes out of doubt. So you continue to doubt yourself, don't demolish yourself. Tell yourself that you can write, that you are a writer, but have a healthy amount of self doubt. Self doubt, I think, is far better than overconfidence.
Ma'am, have you ever thought of writing something about the criminological aspect of the society? Like diving deep into a microscopic level, how people are indulged in crime, because that is also an aspect of the society. It is true that writers mainly focus on romanticizing the facts, but also crime is that's a very important topic to discuss on. So, have you ever thought about it, or will you ever do something on crime in your novels or short stories?
So, I mean, the first novel, which is Stillborn Season, was about a crime. It was about, practically, it was a genocide to some extent, because there was a riot that took place against one particular community. So that, to me, is crime. This novel is again about the marginalization of one community. It's about how, a certain bill discriminated against a certain community, and a certain community was marginalized and discriminated against. So that too is crime. It is also the crime. I mean, I don't know what your definition of crime is, but even a small act, a small theft can be crime. So yes, of course, criminology is a really antiseptic word. But to turn that into fiction, you need to focus, perhaps, you need to magnify a certain moment or a certain trauma that's happened in a person's life and attempt to write about that.
How does the book contribute to a deeper understanding of mother-daughter relationships and womanhood in India? About your book.
Yeah. So this in this particular book, the mother-daughter relationship is a bit unique because the mother's dead and the daughter is in grief. So this book attempts to articulate her grief and her lamentation, and also it's an attempt to commemorate the mother's life. But it's interesting how it's also a comment on womanhood and on motherhood. Motherhood slips into stereotypes very easily. We expect mothers to be nurturing characters and to sit at home and to take care of the family, and we expect the father to step out of the house and to make a living. So it's interesting when the mother decides to step out of the house, and when the mother craves worldly recognition, fame, money, power, and when the father in this book is quite a nurturing character. He's lost his wife, he's young, he's handsome, but he's a very nurturing father figure in this novel. And so it's interesting when that expectation is subverted, when the father becomes a fount of love and affection, and the mother steps out of the house and decides to become worldly and ambitious. So motherhood can be a lot of things. A mother can also be vicious, she can also be cruel, she can also be cold. She can be so many things. So many novels deal with mothers who are not typical. And that becomes interesting. In my novel, the mother is already dead. So she's got her own set of problems and her own, grief to deal with. And, she's a dead character. But in other novels, there are mothers who, they're not very likable or lovable characters because they do things that you don't expect mothers to do. That is an interesting area for literature.
Good morning, ma'am. Actually, I had a question that about you said that to establish your own life to write something. So I had a story idea which I pitched to my friend. So he said that तू अपने बारे में क्यों बोल रहा है? So I was like, am I writing a character on my basis? Does that make it an autobiography or? But I wanted to make the character different, other than me, but
Yeah.
it had some characters of me. So how can I differentiate between my life and that character's life in some certain way?
Yeah, so it's interesting to excavate, like I've said, excavate your. तू अपने बारे में क्या लिख रहा है और क्यों लिख रहा है? That's not really a valid. Why not? Why wouldn't you want to write about yourself? Most authors, all authors, write about it. Shakespeare's written about his own life. Marquez writes about his own little village. Salman Rushdie really excavates his own life. Midnight Children is about his childhood in Bombay. It's just that he fictional. The interesting point is that it's not a Dear Diary account of childhood. It's a fictionalized account. How he uses language, how he embellishes the truth is important. So that embellishment, what you bring to the page, how you play around with your sentences, what is the voice you create, what are the characters you create from that kernel of truth which is your life. That's what turns your apne bare mein kya likh raha hai into good fiction. So never get rid of that. Never get rid of what is important to you and the characters that you have grown up with, because that's where your magic lies really.
I think we come to the end of such a beautiful session, and I think Radhika really added to the insight and also answered to all the queries of the young minds. Thank you so much, Radhika.
Thank you so much.
Okay, let's start of day 3 because when we have 2 ladies on the dais, so really it was a very mesmerizing and energetic start off. Thank you so much, ma'am. It was really great listening to you all, and thank you so much. And right now, I'd like to request Nidhi Garg, ma'am, to felicitate Oberoi.
Radhika.
Yes, Radhika Oberoi. Let's have a huge round of applause for both of them.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your precious time with us.
Thank you.
The whole KNF team is really, really very grateful to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you so much.
And for your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.